let's open up with like I think one of the most burning questions
Okay.
that's out there, and that's how do you prepare for an interview?
I think it's a good question because I don't think that many people prepare properly for what an interview is. I think people prepare for the job, but they don't prepare for like the company. And, people told me in the past that, you have to know a lot about the company itself if you're going to go for an interview. So I think in terms of preparation, what I always recommend for people to do is, do you know the stock price of the company that you're going to work for or that you want to work for? Because it's a good thing to talk about, right? Show that you're paying attention. Do you know about recent happenings at the company? So has the company had any like groundbreaking changes in the last like 6 months? Have they done any acquisitions in the last 6 months? What it's like the latest product that they've gotten out, or things like this really show that you're paying attention to the organization that you want to work for, because many people again go for the job. They don't go for the company. They don't go for the organization. They don't go for the culture. And they need to go for those things because those things show that you're paying attention and that you're not just the person that just wants to cash a check. You want to go make an impact at the organization. So when I think about being prepared, is being prepared in all aspects. Be prepared to talk about, what are you coming up with great questions to ask? And we can jump into that too afterwards. Like, what are great questions to ask in that interview? Prepare those questions in advance so you come across intelligent when you're going to ask those questions, right? That's what I think preparation looks like. Be prepared to talk about, what are impactful things that you've done in your past. Now, a lot of uh, people that interview and leaders and managers and bosses and hiring managers are going to ask you about what's the biggest impactful project that you worked on in the last year. You should be prepared to actually talk about that and not thinking about I don't know, like let me work my way through it. No, come prepared to talk about it. Come to talk about the different examples. Speak about specific metrics of things that you've achieved on how you move things forward. When you talk about preparation, speak in in many cases, people are told not to be selfish.
Yeah,
In the case of interviewing, be selfish.
yeah.
Don't say we did this, say I did this, right? Because you're positioning it differently to show what impact you made to an organization, to a role, to make an impact, right? So when you talk about preparation, it's all these things that make an impact in the actual interview itself. Like that's how I tell people to prepare.
One thing I really love about what you just said, we plug LinkedIn a lot. I mean, it's literally like a organic living resume. I was having a conversation the other day about the about me section. And the
Yes.
funny thing is they asked, they said, "Hey, can you come and take a look at my LinkedIn and give me some feedback?" And I said, "Yeah, of course. That's one of our mainstays." So I took a look at it, and the first thing that stood out, I mean, literally, you go, it's on usually on the first page, or scroll down a little bit. The first thing that stood out was that about me, and it was like, at such and such organization, we do this, and we have done this task, and we do this kind of sales, and these are the clients that we look at. And I said, okay, operation number one, scrap that whole thing. With respect, it's got to say I do this. This is what I'm passionate about. This is what I bring to the table. This is the performance that I have done. Because again,
Exactly.
it's not about us, it's about me, right? That's the title of the section, about me. And the other part is just staying in that for 2 seconds. Not everybody reads your about me, but you may have an employer read it, right? So would you agree when
Absolutely.
I say like you got, I think it's like 2,600 words or something like that. You should use them all.
You should. It's such a good point. The fact of the matter is, when you're looking at your LinkedIn or when people go on your LinkedIn, they are not going through the entire LinkedIn. They're not going through every job experience that you've had. They're not going through your volunteer. They're not going through everything. Though I do believe that your LinkedIn should be fulsome. You should have a good looking, fulsome LinkedIn. When people are going to look at you quickly, or when they just can see you in that like the small bar of when they search your name, you want it to show who you are, what you do, and the impact that you make. So in your title section, it should be it should have what you do. In your about me section, use the word count to explain what it is you do. Because the reality is, when we look at analytics and we have conversations with people from LinkedIn, and I have many different contacts and colleagues that have worked at LinkedIn, they say people go down partially into your page, they go to the about section, and that's as deep as they go on your LinkedIn to understand who you are. You better explain who you are in that about section, or the person's just moving right on to the next page.
That's a really interesting. It's a really interesting point, right? Um, Obviously, we talk about this. We talk about how important your banner is on LinkedIn.
Yes.
Um, you know, it's another piece. It's again, it's the first piece of like creativity that someone sees when they go on, right? They
Right.
have that standard blue banner, right? So you have your picture, which that's table stakes. It needs to be good. The banner is the first part where you can kind of be your own self a little bit, right? And I think that makes it appealing. Listen, Austin, let me ask you a funny one here. So it's great if you have all this experience and you're prepared to come talk about it. What about the person who's like, you know, 20, 21, 22, they've just finished and they don't have any, real world experience? What would you recommend for them to come prepared with for the interview?
It's such an interesting question because I think a lot of new grads are thinking, how do I actually stand out and set myself apart? And, though someone is 20, 21 years old, just finishing school, they've had a lot of different experiences. And I think being prepared to talk about those experiences and how it translates to the corporate world, if we're talking about corporate in this case, then how does it translate? Maybe you were someone who in university you participated in some of the different university groups we have, like the university group for like business, or university group for like engineers, or people who they have ERG groups, and they have all kinds of different groups that you can participate and get involved with in university. That demonstrates that you do above and beyond just the classwork. Like you were um, uh, a citizen of the university itself or the college itself, instead of just a student that went to class, right? How do you talk about that? How do you talk about how you demonstrated leadership? So when you did group projects, were you the lead on the group project? Um, Talk about how you volunteered, right? Do you volunteer at an organization, and are you passionate about certain things and organizations? All this starts to show you beyond just being a quote unquote worker or quote unquote employee, but when you come in, you're going to be a citizen of the organization. And that's what organizations are looking for. They're looking for people who are good, upstanding citizens of the organization that are going to make an impact in role and outside of role, and also can carry the brand of the organization inside the company and outside the company. So, so many people think like, I don't have this ton of experience. I don't have a lot of working experience in terms of what I've done in the past. But the fact of the matter is, everyone has experience. It just comes down to how do you package the experience that you have to then showcase everything that you've done in a way that resonates with that employer or that hiring manager. And I think it's all about that preparation. So even though you just finished school, you've done a lot. How do you package that properly for an employer?
It's funny when you that was the most eloquent answer. That was perfect. I think what's interesting is, you know, there is this propensity to say, "Oh, I don't have any experiences, or I don't have any of this, or I don't have any of that. I don't have enough." Um, and I think we got to take that gun away from our foot. You know what I mean? And focus more on what we do have, right? So you know, sometimes I just feel like we're too quick to say, oh no, that I can't do that, I can't accomplish that. Or if someone asks, well, and puts forth that challenge, well, how are you going to overcome this particular thing where it doesn't seem you have any experience in? Obviously we need to come up with anecdotal stories that we've had in our past, that answer the question in a roundabout way. And of course, to come relatively full circle to where we started, that really does pertain, that does pertain to coming to the interview prepared, right?
And you also, Amelia, make a great point here. And the point that I think is important is don't take yourself out of the opportunity. Right? So often people don't apply for the job, they don't move forward in the interview process because they don't feel that they are fully qualified for the position. When the fact of the matter is, and again, I'm going to give this as a personal opinion, but I believe that if you fit 40 to 50% of the criteria of the job, you should be applying and moving forward through it because you can learn the rest. And obviously, this comes down to things that aren't completely technical positions, but 90% of roles you can learn, right? So I think that don't discount yourself. Don't not apply. And again, obviously, I know that's a double negative, but apply to the positions that you think might be a stretch position for you. If you're applying to roles that you exactly fit and you have 100% of the criteria that's been outlined in the overview, you're overqualified for the job.
Sorry, let's just say that one more time. Like, that sentence is huge. One more time with that sentence.
Yeah. If you fit 100% of the criteria in the overview of that position, you're overqualified for the job.
I love that. That could be like the one line that I think everybody needs to hear. There's a funny thing that I find this a funny thing, and this might be a little controversial what I'm about to say, but my wife and I talk about it, right? So she applied for a new role. She's in healthcare in a cancer research, senior management level, and she had brought me this role, and she said, you know what, I don't know if I want to apply to this role because I don't have all the educational criteria. Now, for what it's worth, she's a biochemistry master's, much more educated than I am and never will be. There's no doubt about that. But this particular role required a PhD, and this is where the controversial piece comes in. And I said, if it was me and I had a master's in biology, I would apply for it. Do you think it's different because you think you look at it from a different lens because you're a woman? And she was like, you know what? You're spot on. Like, if I was a man, I would apply for this right away without even thinking about it. And I'm like, well, then maybe that's the attitude to take. So, kind of piggybacking off your sentence there, I want to ask, do you think, like, okay, so obviously there's a range to this, but do you think it's necessary to have all of the educational experience required for a job?
No. Like, short answer is no. I don't think so. Right? And again, it goes back to not discounting yourself. If you can demonstrate that you have the knowledge to be able to do the role, in many cases, you can get education along the way. And again, I will, from my perspective, any role that I've had, any seat that I've sat in, I've gotten the job, then I've gotten the education, right? I get the education required for the jobs that I want and the job that I'm in, and not vice versa. Because for me, I want to be very I want to be very particular in how I use my time. So I'm not going to get education that's far out here when my job is over here, right? Because I have finite amount of time. So I want to get as much education that I need for the role that I'm in, and then how I'm going to move up along that path and along that path. So I don't think that you necessarily have to have all the accreditations and education to fit certain positions. Now, again, I'm not saying that you don't have, you know, your degree as a doctor to then be a surgeon, right? Obviously, you need this, right? Or if you have to have a law degree to practice law. I'm speaking more generally, right? Generally, if you have a master's and you should have and it's requirement of having a PhD, why would you not apply and have the conversation? Or if you're looking at finance, if it requires a CFA and you have like your CIM, for example, and you're working towards it, I put in an application and say you're in the process of working through to get that education, right? Because a lot of people, they will take a chance on someone if they like them. And I think
Yeah.
that goes actually to another point around, you know, who's advocating for you, who are your sponsors, because we're talking about interviewing, we're talking about resumes, but the fact of the matter is, a lot of this actually comes down to who's putting your name forward and who's sponsoring like your career to put you forward to get you in the room for the interview, because that actually puts you ahead of the next person who just put an application. The person who just put an application and is more qualified is actually behind the person who's a bit less qualified but has sponsorship.
Yeah, I mean, it comes back to the old adage. I mean, if your tribe supports you, when you're going out to meet, another tribe, then they're going to look at it like, oh, this guy's got a lot, or this gal's got a lot of support behind them. And you know what? I like that explanation, especially when like if I think about entry level people, like if you just came out of school and you're going to apply for an entry level financial services rep job, let's say, generally speaking, the qualification is going to be written as you need an investment funds of Canada, IFIC, or the Canadian Securities Course, CSC. But to your point, they'll if you have it in advance, okay, huge green check mark.
Yeah.
Alternatively, if you come in, there's a chance that they may take and you have the try behind you. There's a good chance they may take that chance on you, right?
Of course, right? And they'll take a chance on you, give you a timeline in order to be able to get the accreditation required. But positions in the past where when I was more junior and that's what it was required, I started the position before having that accreditation, got it within, say, the 6 months to then start producing in the role. But again, it's all around the support that you have behind you.
No, that makes perfect sense. I want to pivot to a specific archetype because I think this archetype is relatively common, and I use that
Mhm.
archetype loosely, but the word archetype loosely. But this person has applied to 15 to 20 different jobs. They haven't been getting the roles. Maybe they've got the interviews that the standard. Well, let's talk about that first. Let's say for every 10 jobs that you apply to, probably 20%, 2 of 10 you might get an actual interview for. Is that a pretty good estimate, you'd say?
I'd say it depends, and it depends on if you're applying to specific kinds of roles where it's like one role. Like if you're applying to be the president of a corporation, there's one job, right? If you're applying to be a senior leader at a company, maybe it's one job. If you're applying to a role where there's a cohort of individuals, there's multiple positions, it's very different. So the percentages change with the type of roles that you're applying to.
Okay, so that being aside, that's fair. I love that. And that makes perfect sense. Let's say that archetype person A goes and applies to 20 different jobs over a period of 4 months and doesn't gets interviews but never doesn't get a job. What would you say if we needed to like boil it down to say, I don't know, 3 or 5 or however many things? What would you say the most common? Because again, you having fielded countless interviews, what would you say like are the I don't know top X things, top X reasons why you would not hire a person?
Well, the first thing I would say to that person is, are you asking for feedback? Because so many people don't, right? Are
Ah,
you asking for feedback from the interviews that you're having? Because feedback is a gift. So
yes,
make sure that you're getting it. Feedback is a gift. Make sure that you're asking for it, because feedback only is going to make you better. You get to decipher what makes sense from the feedback, what doesn't make sense, what you can incorporate. Ask for the feedback, because if you don't, you're doing the same thing over and over and over again and not seeing any results.
yeah,
That's the first thing I'd say. Second thing that I would say to the person is, typically in the last round of interviews, so if the person's getting an interview and they're getting to like the last rounds, when you look at the last round of interviews, all the candidates are typically like they're all good, right? So when you're in that last round of interview, you had to think about, what is your differentiate? Like, what are you going to do different? Obviously, at different senior levels or at different levels, whether you be junior, senior, wherever, what you can do is a different thing. But what's your differentiator that you're going to lean on? Is it that you've created a SWOT analysis? Have you created a 30, 60, 90-day plan? Have you created I'll share an interesting story with you on what I did in an interview to actually be different. So, and I put my money where my mouth is. So this is actually why I'm going to tell this story. But this was when I was relatively junior in my career. I wanted to make that jump from being a financial service representative to a financial advisor, right? And I hadn't done deep financial planning before. I'd gone into the interview. I remember at the time there was 15 positions, and I think hundreds and hundreds of people had applied. Now, the people that I was competing against was existing tenured financial advisors and financial planners. Me being an FSR and a young FSR, I'm not getting the job,
Yeah,
right?
financial services
So
rep. It's worth.
yeah, I wouldn't be getting the job against who I am. My differentiators were what I knew was is going to be emotional intelligence and being bold but being professional. Like that was my only shot at this time going to get a job. What I did, again, this is not me this is not me recommending everyone do this specifically, but it is thinking about what a differentiator could be for you. Is I had built out different portfolios, and I knew I was going to be interviewing with two very senior people. So I go into the interview and I handed each of them a portfolio, and I said, in our time today, I'm going to show you what it feels like for you to be a client of Austin Walters as your financial planner. Let's get started. And I proceeded to take them through what it would feel like for me to be their personal financial planner. To and that interview was about 45 minutes. They actually didn't ask me any questions after. They didn't ask me any questions. They didn't actually interview me. I created a meeting, a financial planning meeting for them. A day later, I got offered the job.
This
And the
is
reason why I share that story is thinking about a differentiator, because the fact of the matter is all the people that were interviewing at that point were good. I was actually behind, but my differentiator put me over top of these people, even though they had more accreditation and more tenure. And Emil, you know me well, so you know that's how that story finished. I ended up being the top financial advisor in the country,
yeah.
right? So, but
That's how we
had
met.
they not given me the chance because I ended up being bold, I wouldn't have got the chance to actually be a financial planner.
I love that. Honestly, yeah, you're right. It's funny because I laugh because the emotional intelligence, the bold but professional, that hasn't changed. And
Yeah,
and then what's really funny is obviously that was whatever how many years ago, but that's when we that led it to when we met actually, right? Because that would have been you getting that job led to where we are now, which is kind of cool. And you know what? I want to touch on that. So that is such a cool thing. And what's really neat by having these conversations is it sort of it almost reminds us of the things that we might have done in the past to get ahead, or I might have done it in the past to get ahead. So it's very funny. My own story was, I wrote a 30, 60, 90, 1 year, 3 year, 5 year business plan as part of my interview. And I was like, look, this is why I'm going to be successful. And the reason I want to put a pin in this and stop on this one for a second, not put a pin in it rather, but just stop on this for a second and really talk to it. Is because I think it doesn't really matter the job that you're going for. No matter what job you're going for, do something that sets you apart, right? So if you're going for, I don't know why business analyst comes to mind, but if you're going for a business analyst job or a senior business analyst job, then I mean, we can sum it up. Do your research about what the job looks like, about what the company looks like, about the direction they're taking, about what you can give back to them. Do solicit feedback when you not only talk to the people during the interview, but ideally even before the interview. Do some research around it and find out, the day-to-days on this job. What are the major things and what are the pain points, right? And then we can dig into these pain points. And if you have this for your interview, you go and look, I know these are your pain points. Here's the solution. That's why I say it's number 3, because you're going to provide the solutions in the interview for the pain points that have been talked about. And ideally, with that, kind of fulsome approach, you've set yourself ahead above the competition, right?
It's such a great point. And the other thing too, like even after, like, what's the follow-up? Like,
Yeah.
we talked about asking for feedback. What's the follow-up? The amount of people that don't follow up after the interview is it's crazy to me, but it happens where people don't follow up after the interview, thanking you for the interview. But even after that, we
What's
talk about often how you create like a network, how you create relationships, because you're not going to get every job. But
no.
what you can take from every interaction is the interviewer, the hiring manager becomes part of your network, regardless if you get the job or not. Because they may not hire you today, but you don't know when they're going to have a role tomorrow, a month from now, a year from now. And if they remember you weren't the right candidate for that, but they liked you and you were impressive, they're going to call you up after. You may not even have to interview again,
Yeah.
right? So like, what's how are you staying in touch? How are you um keeping staying in touch, but also keeping top of mind? A great, you know what? I'm gonna give listen, everyone on the call, I'm gonna give you right now like an ace. And this is the ace I'm gonna give you. How you stay in touch with people is if you read an interesting book, if you read an interesting article, if you listen to an interesting podcast and it was impactful for you and resonate with you, but also would resonate with someone that you interacted with and maybe impactful for their business, send it to them. Send it to them and say, you know what? I heard this. I was thinking about you. I know there's different changes happening within your business, organization, company. Thought it'd be helpful. Boom, send it to them. One, it gives you an interaction. Two, it shows that you're thinking about them and how you can alleviate pain points that they have. If you can solve problems for people, you're going to be top of mind for them. It's going to build your network. It's going to give you opportunities in the future.
It's just like it's actually the exact same thing in sales, right? Like honest to goodness, like half of whatever the product you're selling, okay, let's call it tennis balls, okay, just to be zany. If you're selling tennis balls, you want the person who's buying tennis balls, they're like, I got to buy tennis balls. I want them to think, okay, Emil, think of Emil because he sells tennis balls, right? So the more I stay in contact with them, the more top of mind I am, the more likely that that person is going to come to my shop to buy my tennis supplies, right? And it's the exact same thing with sales that it is with interviewing, with building that relationship. And Austin, to your point, it's really interesting because the relationships that you build now or really at any time in your career will continue for decades. Like
It's
the
true.
amount of how many times have you, I mean, even look at this, how many times have you come back to a person that you didn't talk to, or you stayed in touch with rather, but now you're like, oh, you know what, they come to you, ask for something, or you come to them, ask for something, and you've known each other
All
for
the time.
10, 20 years,
All the time. All the
right? it's
time.
it's such it's such a huge thing. Listen, we're doing something slightly different this time. So this is not only a live recording, but it's going to be continue. It's going to be posted and hosted at least for the next 30 days on the event space. So anybody that missed this call will actually have the opportunity to come in, join it, check it out. And if you guys have questions or whatever, send Austin or myself or both of us in a chat group. You can DM us within the TSM Maps app. You can DM us directly, and we'll get back to you accordingly.
Perfect. This was great.
Yeah,
Look
awesome.
forward to the next Ask Me Anything.
Yeah. You have a good night, man.
Take care.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys.